Plot twist nobody expected? Prince Harry was suddenly rushing onto what insiders had already labeled an emergency flight back to Britain. And just like that, this stopped looking like another routine royal spat and started smelling like something far messier. This was not some ordinary palace adjustment. This was not about boring paperwork. This was not even about a title. According to mounting reports, one of the final official links tying Harry to the institution he entered at birth had unexpectedly come under review, and the timing sent shock waves racing through royal circles. If the palace genuinely planned to remove his Counselor of State status, then the debate was no longer about whether Harry had abandoned royal life. The real question was whether the monarchy had finally decided to abandon Harry instead. As whispers echoed through royal corridors, those close to the situation noticed something rather strange. Harry stayed quiet publicly. He issued no official statement. He did not instantly launch a counterattack. Instead, there was silence. And in royal drama, silence usually screams louder than words ever manage to. People who have followed this family for years know anger is expected. Frustration is nothing new. But silence often means the damage cut far deeper than anyone cares to acknowledge. The reported review targeted something many observers ignore when discussing Harry's exit from royal duties. The Counselor of State position was never merely a ceremonial phrase buried inside constitutional language. Symbolically, it stood for trust. It stood for closeness to the crown. It stood for the belief that despite everything that unfolded, despite interviews, documentaries, accusations, and years of public tension, some official bond still survived. That was exactly why reports of a review instantly sparked panic among Harry's supporters and growing delight among his critics. Everyone recognized the same reality. If that connection vanished, it would mark a dramatic shift in how the monarchy viewed one of its most controversial sons. While headlines dominated public debates, the emotional consequences were quietly unfolding behind palace doors. Meghan reportedly watched Harry absorb the news in a way she had rarely witnessed before. Rage would have been simpler. Rage could be challenged. Rage could be understood. But this felt entirely different. It was the face of someone questioning whether the institution that shaped his whole life was preparing to deliver its final verdict. For years, Harry had existed between two worlds. He stepped away from official royal duties, yet his identity remained forever linked to the monarchy. Every headline reminded him of it. Every public appearance reminded everyone else of it. The palace may have altered the rules of engagement, but it had never completely severed that connection. Now, however, insiders were beginning to suspect that this final tie was precisely what palace strategists hoped to confront. A sealed briefing folder reportedly started circulating among senior figures inside royal operations. The phrase Counselor Status Review looked harmless on paper, but those familiar with palace culture understood the significance immediately. These are not words casually inserted into official discussions. These are the kinds of phrases that spark meetings, consultations, and private conversations capable of reshaping relationships forever. At the center of it all stood King Charles. And that was where things became truly complicated because every constitutional issue suddenly carried two different meanings. For the king, there was the duty of protecting the monarchy. But for the father, there was the uncomfortable truth that every official decision involving Harry would inevitably become deeply personal. That contradiction shadowed every conversation. Charles understood that any move would publicly be defended as constitutional housekeeping. Yet he also knew exactly how Harry would probably see it. Not as procedure, not as administration, but as abandonment. Meanwhile, Prince William reportedly viewed the situation through a completely different lens. To William, the future of the monarchy demands clarity. The institution cannot function amid endless uncertainty. The future king has spent years watching confusion generate headlines, distractions, and constant questions surrounding royal authority. From that viewpoint, preserving official roles for someone no longer involved in working royal life could seem increasingly impossible to defend. But even William's perspective came with emotional consequences, because no matter how neatly constitutional arguments are presented, there is no escaping the reality that the person involved is his brother. That is why insiders describe the mood inside royal circles as unusually strained. This was never merely about a role. It was about belonging. It was about identity. It was about where Harry belongs within the story of the monarchy moving forward. Even Queen Camilla reportedly recognized the emotional risk. Sources claim that one quiet question echoed throughout discussions surrounding the review. Had Harry been properly informed? Had anyone genuinely explained what was happening before reports started spreading? Because once stories like these slip beyond palace walls, they take on a life entirely their own. And that is exactly what unfolded. The deeper investigators dug, the more they uncovered signs suggesting concerns over Harry's status may have been growing far longer than anyone publicly realized. Some insiders pointed toward earlier events, private meetings, and moments when Harry reportedly appeared increasingly disconnected from official royal structures, despite technically maintaining certain constitutional ties. Then came a moment many now believe changed everything. A formal royal gathering, an elegant setting, cameras absent, public attention elsewhere. Yet inside the palace, people still whisper about it. Harry reportedly noticed something before anyone uttered a word. Information packets were being handed out among active working royals. Discussions centered around future responsibilities, planning, representation, duty, and somehow his name appeared absolutely nowhere. The omission may have seemed insignificant to outsiders, but inside royal culture, tiny details often carry enormous weight. What remains unsaid can matter more than what is spoken. What is not handed over can matter more than what is. Harry allegedly approached a senior courtier quietly. No shouting, no drama, just a straightforward question. Expecting a straightforward answer, the response reportedly landed like a sledgehammer. His position, he was informed, was being treated as inactive. Inactive, one single word. But inside that one word existed an entire message. Not removed, not restored, not included, not trusted. Simply inactive. And for Harry, that may have been the moment suspicion finally transformed into certainty, because inactive status suggested something far more alarming than exclusion. It hinted that decisions regarding his future were already being made without him. As reports about the emergency flight spread and palace discussions intensified, one reality became impossible to dismiss. The crisis was no longer heading toward debate. It was racing toward confrontation. The first meeting after Harry's arrival was not the dramatic royal spectacle many had imagined. There were no cameras, no palace balcony, no carefully arranged photographs. And that was exactly what made it so dangerous. The most explosive royal confrontations rarely unfold publicly. They happen behind polished doors, where nobody is permitted to witness history-changing course. Harry arrived carrying far more than exhaustion from a rushed flight. He carried years of frustration, disappointment, unanswered questions, and the growing suspicion that the institution he once defended was preparing to redefine his place within it. The atmosphere reportedly felt different from previous family disputes. This time, there was paperwork. There were prepared discussions. There were unmistakable signs that the conversation had moved beyond emotions and straight into decisions. When Harry finally came face to face with William, the tension reportedly became impossible to miss. The brothers no longer viewed the crisis through the same perspective. Harry saw a family bond being carefully dismantled piece by piece. William saw an institution attempting to safeguard its future from endless uncertainty. Neither man viewed himself as the villain. That was the heartbreaking part. Both believed they were protecting something precious. Yet those missions now appeared completely incompatible. As discussions grew more intense, Harry reportedly asked the question nobody inside the room wanted to answer directly. Was this truly about constitutional procedure, or was it really about belonging? The difference mattered because removing a role could be justified. Removing a sense of family was something entirely different. The room reportedly sank into a silence that spoke louder than any official statement ever could. Then attention turned toward the one figure whose decision ultimately mattered most, King Charles. For weeks, perhaps even months, advisors had debated possibilities. Reports had circulated. Reviews had been examined. Recommendations had been drafted. But none of it meant anything until the king decided whether to proceed, and that responsibility weighed heavily. Charles understood the constitutional arguments being placed before him. The monarchy survives through structure, consistency, and public competence. Official roles are supposed to reflect official responsibilities. Those arguments sounded perfectly reasonable on paper. Yet every page he reviewed carried the name of his son. That reality transformed administration into heartbreak. Those closest to the situation described Charles as painfully aware of how Harry would interpret the outcome. Publicly, the palace could describe the move as modernization. Advisors could label it clarification. Constitutional experts could describe it as necessary. But Harry would almost certainly hear something entirely different. He would hear yet another door slamming shut. As pressure intensified inside royal circles, the crisis escaped palace walls and exploded into the public arena. Newspapers went wild. Television commentators argued endlessly. Royal experts offered competing interpretations. Suddenly, the story was no longer confined to private meetings. It became a national debate about loyalty, duty, family, and the future of the monarchy itself. It became the story of a son trying to understand whether duty had finally become more important than belonging. As Harry prepared to leave Britain once again, the official arguments may have been resolved, but the emotional questions remained unanswered. The palace could close files. It could complete reviews. It could release carefully crafted explanations, but it could never erase the image that continues haunting this entire saga. A prince racing across the world after discovering that one of his final official ties to the crown might vanish forever. And even now, countless royal watchers believe the real story is not the decision itself. The real drama lies in what happens next, because some royal wounds fade with time, while others simply wait for the next chapter, and their echoes often outlive the headlines that first made them famous.